Om Ajnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Dhena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Speaking of Srimad Bhagavatam, we're going to read the verses to Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 52. Let's recite together. Shukadeva Goswami said, "My dear king, thus graced by Lord Krishna, Muchukunda circumambulated him and bowed down to him. Then Muchukunda, the beloved descendant of Ikshvaku, exited through the mouth of the cave." Can't you have it on the mode where you just have verses? Opposite. We're living in an opposite world here. Seeing the size of human beings, animals, trees, and plants had severely reduced, and thus realizing that the age of Kali was at hand, Muchukunda left for the north. The sober king, beyond material association and free of doubt, was convinced of the value of austerity. Absorbing his mind in Lord Krishna, he came to Gandhamandana mountain. There he arrived at Badarika Ashram, the abode of Lord Narayan, where, remaining tolerant of all dualities, he peacefully worshipped the Supreme Lord Hari by performing severe austerities. The Lord returned to Mathura, which was surrounded by Yavanas. Then he destroyed the army of barbarians and began taking their valuables to Dwarka. As the wealth was being carried by oxen and men under Lord Krishna's direction, Jarasandha appeared at the head of 23 armies. O king, seeing the fierce waves of the enemy's army, the two Madhavas, imitating human behavior, ran swiftly away. Abandoning the abundant riches, fearless but feigning fear, they went many yojanas on their lotus-like feet. When he saw them fleeing, powerful Jarasandha laughed loudly and then pursued them with charioteers and foot soldiers. He could not understand the exalted position of the two lords. Apparently exhausted after fleeing a long distance, the two lords climbed a high mountain named Pravarshana, upon which Lord Indra showered incessant rain. Although he knew they were hiding on the mountain, Jarasandha could find no trace of them. Therefore, O king, he placed firewood on all sides and set the mountain ablaze. The two of them suddenly jumped from the burning mountain, which was 11 yojanas high, and fell to the ground. Unseen by their opponent or his followers, O king, those two most exalted Yadus returned to their city of Dwarka, which had the ocean as a protective moat. Jarasandha, moreover, mistakenly thought that Balaram and Keshava had burned to death in the fire. Thus he withdrew his vast military force and returned to the Magadha kingdom. As ordered by Lord Brahma, Raivata, the opulent ruler of Anarta, gave Lord Balaram his daughter Raivati in marriage. This has already been discussed. O hero among the Kurus, the Supreme Lord himself, Govinda, married Bhishmaka's daughter, Vaidarbhi, who is a direct expansion of the goddess of fortune. The Lord did this by her desire, and in the process he beat down Shalva and other kings who took Shishupal's side. Indeed, as everyone watched, Sri Krishna took Rukmini just as Garuda boldly stole nectar from the demigods. King Parikshit said, "The Supreme Lord married Rukmini, the beautiful-faced daughter of Bhishmaka, in the Rakshasa style, or so I have heard. My Lord, I wish to hear how the immeasurably powerful Lord Krishna took away his bride while defeating such kings as Magadha and Shalva. What experienced listener, O Brahmana, could ever grow satiated while listening to the pious, charming, and ever-fresh topics of Lord Krishna, which cleanse away the world's contamination?" Sri Badarayani said, "There was a king named Bhishmaka, the powerful ruler of Vidarbha. He had 5 sons and 1 daughter of lovely countenance. Rukmi was the firstborn son, followed by Rukmarta, Rukmabahu, Rukmakesh, and Rukmamali. Their sister was the exalted Rukmini. Hearing of the beauty, prowess, transcendental character, and opulences of Mukunda from visitors to the palace who sang his praises, Rukmini decided that he would be the perfect husband for her. Lord Krishna knew that Rukmini possessed intelligence, auspicious bodily markings, magnanimity, beauty, proper behavior, and all other good qualities. Concluding that she would be an ideal wife for him, he made up his mind to marry her. O king, because Rukmi envied the Lord, he forbade his family members to give his sister to Krishna, although they wanted to. Instead, Rukmi decided to give Rukmini to Shishupal. Dark-eyed Vaidarbi was aware of this plan, and it deeply upset her. Analyzing the situation, she quickly sent a trustworthy Brahmana to Krishna. Upon reaching Dwarka, the Brahmana was brought inside by the gatekeepers and saw the primeval personality of Godhead sitting on a golden throne. Seeing the Brahmana, Sri Krishna, Lord of the Brahmanas, came down from his throne and seated him. Then the Lord worshipped him, just as he himself is worshipped by the demigods. After the Brahmana had eaten and rested, Sri Krishna, the goal of saintly devotees, came forward, and while massaging the Brahmana's feet with his own hands, he patiently questioned him as follows. The Supreme Lord said, O best of exalted Brahmanas, are your religious practices sanctioned by senior authorities, proceeding without great difficulty? Is your mind always fully satisfied? When a Brahmana is satisfied with whatever comes his way and does not fall away from his religious duties, those very religious principles become his desire cow, fulfilling all his wishes. An unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one planet to another, even if he becomes king of heaven. But a satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. I repeatedly bow my head in respect to those Brahmanas who are satisfied with their lot. Saintly, prideless, and peaceful, they are the best well-wishers of all living beings. O Brahmana, is your king attending to your welfare? Indeed, that king in whose country the citizens are happy and protected is very dear to me. Whence have you come, crossing the impassable sea, and for what purpose? Explain all this to us, if it is not a secret, and tell us what we may do for you. Thus questioned by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who incarnates to perform his pastimes, the Brahmana told him everything. She, Rukmini, said in her letter, as read by the Brahmana, O beauty of the worlds, having heard of your qualities, which enter the ears of those who hear and remove their bodily distress, and having also heard of your beauty, which fulfills all the visual desires of those who see, I have fixed my shameless mind upon you, O Krishna. O Mukunda, you are equal only to yourself in lineage, character, beauty, knowledge, youthfulness, wealth, and influence. O lion among men, you delight the minds of all mankind. What aristocratic, sober-minded, and marriageable girl of a good family would not choose you as her husband when the proper time has come? Therefore, my dear Lord, I have chosen you as my husband, and I surrender myself to you. Please come swiftly, O Almighty One, and make me your wife. My dear lotus-eyed Lord, let Shishupal never touch the hero's portion like a jackal stealing the property of a lion. If I have sufficiently worshipped the Supreme Personality of Godhead by pious works, sacrifices, charity, rituals, and vows, and also by worshipping the demigods, brahmanas, and gurus, then may Gadagraja come and take my hand, and not Dhammaghosha's son or anyone else. O unconquerable one, tomorrow when my marriage ceremony is about to begin, you should arrive unseen in Vidarbha and surround yourself with the leaders of your army. Then crush the forces of Chaitya and Maghavendra and marry me in the Rakshasa style, winning me with your valor. Since I will be staying within the inner chambers of the palace, you may wonder, how can I carry you away without killing some of your relatives? But I shall tell you a way. On the day before the marriage, there is a grand procession to honor the royal family's deity. And in this procession, the new bride goes outside the city to visit goddess Girija. O lotus-eyed one, great souls like Lord Shiva hanker to bathe in the dust of your lotus feet and thereby destroy their ignorance. If I cannot obtain your mercy, I shall simply give up my vital force, which will have become weak from the severe penances I will perform. Then after hundreds of lifetimes of endeavor, I may obtain your mercy. The Brahmana said, this is the confidential message I have brought with me. O Lord of the Yadus, please consider what must be done in these circumstances and do it at once. Any of the verses that you heard that connected them, that you became fascinated, they fastened themselves to your mind? Yes. There's one fortunate soul here who a verse from the Bhagavatam has fastened itself to his mind. Well, now let's hear about that.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
I don't remember the exact verse. It was a little bit previous, but it really stuck to me. I'm sorry, I can't.
We'll find it.
Yeah.
Just kind of give us an indication.
I think it was.
Mukarvin's right here, and we have her ready to find it. Go ahead. Give us the gist.
It was something very inspiring. It was one of, I think it was in the middle portion of Rukmini's dialogue. I
Go to the middle.
Exactly what it was. I apologize.
Well, you got to at least try. Can you? I'm saying, can you move to the middle? You hear what he's saying?
Sure.
Trying to
Yeah.
move him. He's in anxiety. He can't find his verse. This is another kind of devotional process. You hear a verse, you remember part of it, but you can't remember where it is, and then you go crazy trying to find it. You can spend hours. You'll call people on the phone, say, no, it's not there, it's in the other place. And when you find it, then your life comes back. So this is a kind of separation from Krishna. So you should become attached to the Shastra like that these verses become your life and soul, and you have to find them. So we have to help him. Otherwise, the rest of the day, he's going to be in this kind of anxiety.
Yeah, I can't, every verse I'm reading is actually, if I read it again, it's so transcendental that every verse has a special quality to it. So I'll just repeat one that really resonates with me right now. And it says that the Brahmanas are the
Number?
10.52.33.
3-3. Okay.
It says that essentially that the Brahmanas are the best well-wishers of all living beings, which is nice to hear.
I repeatedly bow my head in respect to those Brahmanas who are satisfied with their lot. Saintly, prideless, and peaceful, they are the best well-wishers of living beings. And the one before it says that, an unsatisfied Brahmana wanders restlessly from one planet to another, even if he becomes king of heaven. But a satisfied Brahmana, though he may possess nothing, rests peacefully, all his limbs free of distress. Those very important verses. Yeah? Let's look at the purports, if they have purports. You just click on the verse instead of going all the way back. The verse itself where you were. Anyway, there's many methods. Go to the one before, please. Those who are unsatisfied feel distress throughout their body, becoming subject to many diseases. A satisfied Brahmana, however, though he may possess nothing, is peaceful and calm, and there is no distress within his body or mind. Next. Just hit next. It's right there. Srila Sridhar Swami explains that swalabha also means achieving one's self, or in other words, self-realization. Thus, an advanced Brahmana is always satisfied with his spiritual understanding, never depending on material formalities or facilities. That's beautiful, isn't it? He's always satisfied with his spiritual understanding. This is something Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, fourth chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Give me a Gita, please. You don't hear that on the street every day. Give me a Gita. It's like, I don't need anything, I'm fine. Krishna says the transcendental knowledge is so sublime and satisfying. This is Bhagavad Gita. Fourth chapter. And it's 38th verse. Okay, now you're going to really enjoy this verse. This verse, we'll look at the Sanskrit and the English. I'll say, please repeat. Nahi jnanena sadrisham pavitram iha vidyate tat swayam yoga samsiddha kalinatmani vindati. In this world, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Such knowledge is the mature fruit of all mysticism. And one who has become accomplished in the practice of devotional service enjoys this knowledge within himself in due course of time. Do you find that to be complementary to the verse we just read about the Brahmana being satisfied with knowledge? Please say yes. Yes. Purport. When we speak of transcendental knowledge, we do so in terms of spiritual understanding. As such, there is nothing so sublime and pure as transcendental knowledge. Ignorance is the cause of our bondage, and knowledge is the cause of our liberation. This knowledge is the mature fruit of devotional service, and when one is situated in transcendental knowledge, he need not search for peace elsewhere, for he enjoys peace within himself. In other words, this knowledge and peace culminate in Krishna consciousness. That is the last word in Bhagavad Gita. And the next verse is, continues in the same vein. Shadava labhate jnanam tatpara samyatendriyaha jnanam labva param shantim achiranadi gacchati. A faithful man who is dedicated to transcendental knowledge and who subdues his senses is eligible to achieve knowledge. And having achieved it, he quickly attains the supreme spiritual peace. Purport. Such knowledge in Krishna consciousness can be achieved by a faithful person who believes firmly in Krishna. One is called a faithful man who thinks that simply by acting in Krishna consciousness he can attain the highest perfection. This faith is attained by the discharge of devotional service and by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, which cleanses one's heart of all material dirt. Over and above this, one should control the senses. A person who is faithful to Krishna and who controls his senses can easily attain perfection in the knowledge of Krishna consciousness without delay. I offer my respectful obeisances to His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, and to all the devotees present here, and everybody who has joined us online this morning. These two verses are very encouraging, aren't they? Because there's a way in which we have a sense, people in general have a sense that the search for happiness will not end well, and that it's not going well either. And when one comes closer to spiritual life, there's an intuition that happiness is already within me, and I just have to find it. That revelation is quite encouraging because it seems more reasonable and it's altogether possible to attain it. And in this verse, Krishna's talking about how if one continues the process of devotional service and controls the senses, then he can attain the highest perfection. And this is what he calls faith, or this abiding sense that by performing devotional service, especially by chanting Hare Krishna, then everything else is included. In fact, there's a feeling of separation from Krishna through the false ego, in the sense that I conceive myself as an all-important living entity. That is, Deha Patra Kalatradeshu Atmasaini Susatsapi. Shukadeva Goswami describes how through the extension of myself, through the misconception of material life, I consider that my body, the bodies of my family members, my nation by extension, and all of my temporary possessions, these become all important. This is the small world created by my false ego. And living within this small world is I experience anxiety at every moment. Bhayam dvitiya binibeshata syad. Because I've created this reflected world, which is an extension of my false ego, I then experience fear. Dvitiya means a second life, outside the life of Krishna. Whereas getting the clear knowledge of Krishna consciousness, as described in the Bhagavad Gita 434, actually it's 435. First of all, Krishna says you need to have perfect knowledge, and to get that you have to go to a person. There's people carry knowledge around, and a person who has attained knowledge then can give it to you if you approach in the right mood. This is the way to come to this perfect knowledge. Then he describes what perfect knowledge is in 35. Gyajgatva na punar moham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshani drakshantyatma atomayi. Having obtained real knowledge from a self-realized soul, you will never fall again into such illusion, for by this knowledge you will see that all living beings are but part of the Supreme, or in other words, they are mine. So there's a sense of oneness when one has transcendental knowledge. Of course, those who propound undifferent monism, that we're all the same as God or we merge into God, have an erroneous philosophy which is also not satisfying and is actually detrimental to the happiness of the soul. Krishna describes in the Bhagavad Gita, klesho dikartaras tesham. It's a very troublesome kind of philosophy when it is not clearly defined that we are servants of Krishna. Although we're one, we're separate at the same time. This is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's perfect synthesis of the Vedic philosophy, which is achintya beda abed tattva, which is I'm simultaneously one with and different from Krishna. However, in my materialistic mindset, I consider myself to be separated from Krishna. And again, bhayam dvitiya, because of that, syat, fear arises in my life. So the solution, or spiritual life, means to merge back into Krishna. And one can easily do that by chanting Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And this merging means to merge in purpose and in service. There's a blank spot right over there, if you could fill it in. I hate those oases in there. Blank spot. Thank you. Hare Krishna. So, when we have this sense of spiritually merging into the existence of Krishna, by merging our purpose with Krishna's purpose, I no longer have a separate purpose from Krishna, but my purpose is one with Krishna's, and I merge into him in the mood of service, then I can feel this satisfaction. And transcendental knowledge means to understand that I'm in Krishna and I'm his. This is what Krishna is telling us is the result of getting perfect knowledge. And Krishna is all-pervading. He describes this at the end of the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that by a single fragment of myself, he says, I pervade all these worlds. He expands himself from the spiritual world into, of course, first Balaram, and then the Chaturvyuha, and then Mahasankarshan, and then there are the Purushas that expand the material world. And one of the Purushas extends himself into every atom and into the heart of every living entity. So Krishna's everywhere. And his energies are also Krishna. Although he says in the Bhagavad Gita, Binna Prakritir Ashtada, when he describes his various energies, he says, Bhumir Apo Analovayu Kamano Bhujar Evacha Ahankara Ityame Binna Prakritir Ashtada. He names the various separated material energies. So in one sense, they're separated, but in another sense, they're also Krishna, because they emanate from him. And Aham Sarvasya Prabhu, everything emanates from Krishna, and in one sense, everything is Krishna. So in spiritual knowledge, in spiritual consciousness, one merges back into Krishna and becomes aware that I'm dependent on Krishna. Krishna is within me. I'm within Krishna. And if one hones one's desire to serve Krishna, then one becomes perfectly harmonious with one's own purpose in life, which is to serve Krishna, and with the universe. And then one can feel this satisfaction. So as Rukmini was describing the Brahmanas, or at least in the chapter we were reading, it's described how Brahmanas become peaceful because they're in Brahman. And this Brahman means to be focused on the Supreme Brahman. And to that end, now we're going to, well, first we'll sing some songs. And then after that, I'm going to go into the 7th chapter, 7th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, continuing from where we left off last time, which was, we started on the 1st chapter of the 7th canto, and this morning, whatever it is, we'll talk about the 2nd chapter of the Bhagavatam. O Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye. So we're continuing with the Srimad Bhagavatam recital, which is the very means of conquest. The material existence is difficult, we should say impossible to overcome for the living entity until he has outside help. Therefore, Srila Vyasadeva has given this transcendental literature, which is an incarnation of Krishna. Anarto pasanam sakshat bhakti yoga madhok saje lokasya janato vidvams chakre satvata samhitam. Knowing that people in general were helpless without this knowledge, Srila Vyasadeva compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's very charming also how he did so with the guidance of his spiritual master Narada Muni. You can read about this in the 5th chapter of the Bhagavatam. And if you want something extra to do in your life, you can memorize that chapter. Just take time to memorize it. All you have to do is just recite it every day and think about it and pray, and then Krishna will reveal all the verses to you. And in that chapter we find that Narada Muni had come to the aid of Srila Vyasadeva and told him why Srila Vyasadeva, his disciple, was feeling despondent. And this is a great lesson for all of us. And the reason was, he said, that you haven't very specifically elaborated upon the personal pastimes of Krishna, the personality of Godhead. And people need to hear that, and they need to understand the process of pure devotional service. So after going into samadhi and seeing for himself the pastimes of the Lord and how his energies are working, Srila Vyasadeva came out, and he then compiled the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is known as Samadhi Bhashya. It's what you say after you come out of perfect samadhi. And that's what you want to hear. So that by hearing that regularly every day, one can rise above the influence of the three modes of material nature. The influence actually resides within the heart of every living entity because of contact with material nature. The living entity becomes influenced and therefore identifies him or herself with the material body and the material world. But nasha praishu abhadreshu nityam bhagavata sevaya. By serving the Bhagavatam, and how do you do that? By listening, taking the time out. It's the way to love Krishna, is take time out from my own agenda and my own attendance to my material necessities and needs and wants. And I just give oral reception. Submissive oral reception also means that I'm submissive to the message, that I believe in it. I understand through well-reasoned faith that it is Krishna himself. And that by simply hearing, even though I don't know anything right now, if I listen in the assembly of devotees, that I'll come to know who Krishna is and my heart will become purified. Nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavat-yutama shloke bhaktir bhavati naishtiki. The contaminations within the heart are reduced by this process. So starting off in chapter 2, the 7th canto, which is entitled Hiranyakashipu, King of the Demons. And this will be very important teachings are coming in the Bhagavatam through the story of the appearance of Hiranyakashipu. And not the least of which is explained by Prahlad Maharaj in his prayers to Lord Nrsingadev. After this, spoiler alert, if you don't want to know the end of the story, just close your ears right now. Lord Nrsingadev comes and kills Hiranyakashipu. He tears him to shreds, actually. And Hiranyakashipu represents the highest attainment of material success. You can't get any better than that. He subjugated everyone except for Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva. And he also had everything. He had everything. He was controlling everything. He was on the top of the world through his austerities. And Prahlad Maharaj then points out in his prayers that within a moment he was vanquished. He said, therefore, why would I want anything? He saw for himself how powerful his father became and how in one moment Lord Nrsingadev came and wiped everything out. So he said, so why should I want anything in the material world? I don't need it. I don't need to be involved with that at all. And we can assume that any kind of attainment in the material world Hiranyakashipu had already. So he's the iconic figure in the Srimad Bhagavatam. Hiranyakashipu means that he had all the material comforts everybody's looking for. And if one analyzes the way of material life, one will come to see that it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Everything should be dedicated to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then one can work hard and utilize one's God-given talents to apply oneself for attaining something, as long as it's for Krishna. But if you do it for yourself, you'll end up in getting exactly what you didn't want instead. For instance, recently there was a comprehensive study. I forget which university did this, but it just came out, and it's all about the people who drive Ubers. And I think they studied Uber. I don't know if they studied Lyft. MIT. Well, that adds a little more weight to it too, doesn't it? Study at MIT about Uber drivers. It ends up after you take away the depreciation from your car, the cost of the gas, the opportunity time that you took and everything like that, driving and driving and driving, you earn $3.33 an hour, which isn't enough to survive, especially in Silicon Valley. And the study also pointed out that most drivers don't know that because they're independent contractors, so that they're supposed to figure that all out for themselves and calculate. So we're supposed to calculate also, like, what do you get out of working very hard in the material world? Take away the depreciation and all the ways in which you end up spending your energy in this world. And if you look at the end result, you find out that you end up in negative numbers. You can't win in the material world. That's one of the great lessons of Hiranyakashipu. And if someone loses their optimism for the material world, of course, they can simply become morose. But the philosophy of actual spiritual life means that I have a higher purpose, I have senses for a reason, and I can use them industriously in order to please the Lord. And then, no matter what I do, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Neha bikramanashosti pratyavayo navidite solpamapyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. That even if you try a little bit on that side, then you'll be successful, and it'll all be counted. And even if you don't, externally it appears you didn't succeed, because you tried for the Lord, you succeed. And of course the famous story of Jatayu is there to prove that. So, in this second chapter, Hiranyakashipu is aggrieved. So why is he grieved? Because Hiranyaka was killed. It was his brother. And people become attached to their family members. And when somebody dies, then they become very morose. It's natural. Hiranyakashipu was especially morose, but he was always also angry. So we'll find in this chapter that he takes out his anger by getting together a bunch of his gundas. That's what they are. They're really demoniac people. They're demons and rakshasas. And people have Krishna describes this in the Bhagavad Gita. People have various natures. And some people are divine and others are asuric, demoniac. They have asuric nature. And when people have asuric nature, it comes out very clearly in this chapter that they want to destroy Brahminical culture. And they want to wreck the whole world so nobody can use it. Nobody else gets to use it. They just try to exploit it all, and anything else they try to ruin. And they're really against God. They're against the idea of God. There is systematic propaganda, Prabhupada writes in his commentary to Srimad Bhagavatam, to stop the Krishna consciousness movement or the propagation of knowledge about God. And we'll find that there are people who are averse. And there are, besides the ways in which in this chapter we find that Hiranyakashipu and his followers went around and killed people, they cut down trees, they killed cows, they broke up the Vedic yajnas that were going on, defiled them, did everything they could to disrupt the culture, especially performing sacrifice. So in a similar way, there's systematic ways through which knowledge gets filtered through our society. Juta Karma Prabhu, in his talk at Stanford when he came here a while back, talked about this, and he talks about it in his book, Forbidden Archaeology, how there's a knowledge filter that comes through small groups of so-called scientists who then only allow certain kinds of knowledge to come into the general textbooks that are used in high schools and in schools below high school, so that this kind of demoniac influence is inculcated, knowledge is inculcated into the general masses of people. Therefore, Prabhupada had a very specific point to his mission of defeating this kind of knowledge that propounds that matter comes from life, and that purpose of life is altogether materialistic. There's nothing beyond this world. There is no God in control. And Krishna describes this mentality in the 16th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. So Hiranyakashipu is an iconic figure that represents all of this. And he got together all of his people, and he said, wreck everything. So this is the first part of the chapter. And Prabhupada writes that he agitated the minds of the demons and rakshasas to disturb the rituals of the sages and others on earth. So when those kinds of rituals are destroyed, then there's great anxiety within the world, because this is the source of happiness. It's counterintuitive. People don't know at first the science that if you please God through the proper Vedic rituals, then you'll also become pleased. This requires sattva gun. You have to have a little bit of tinge of goodness to understand how this works. Otherwise, people in rajas think you become happy by working harder and harder. And people in the mode of ignorance think you become happy by sleeping and taking more and more intoxication. But through a sattva gun, one realizes that the divine system, which Krishna gives in a verse that we can overlook because we've heard it so many times. But it's a verse you can live in, and if you keep these three categories in your mind, then your life will always be perfectly aligned. And he says, Bhoktaram yagatapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suridam sarvabhutanam gyatva mam shantim richati. So these three things are practically, when practically applied in our life, will bring us to perfect harmony. So the first is that whatever we do is meant to be given as a service to Krishna, because he's the enjoyer of all sacrifice. As it's put there, it sounds like abstract language, or it may be abstract to us, so it may sound archaic or non-applicable in our life. He's the enjoyer of all sacrifices. What do you mean by that? Bhoktaram yagatapasam. It means that everything's meant to be done for Krishna. He's the beneficiary of all our activities. And when we do that, it's just as if we're feeding, using all our senses in order to feed the stomach. And then the stomach knows what to do with it. It perfectly distributes all of the food that we give to all the limbs of the body, and the whole body lives harmoniously. And so, remembering this, that as Prahlad Maharaj says in his prayers, Naivatmana prabhur ayam nijalabha purno manam janada vidusha karuno vranite. That Krishna doesn't need our offerings, but when we give to Krishna, then we become happy and satisfied. And he goes on to say that this is just like when you decorate your face, then the reflection of your face in the mirror is also decorated. Have you ever noticed that? So in a similar way, this verse points out that we're expansions of Krishna. We're one with Krishna but separate, and our purpose is to serve Krishna, and when we do, we become satisfied and happy. Just like when we serve the stomach, then we also become happy. So we become connected to Krishna through this. So remembering that when my energy goes towards satisfying Krishna, then I become satisfied. This is one of the great secrets of life. Sarvaloka Maheshwaram solves a lot of problems, because there's always anxiety in one's mind about what's my stuff and what's other people's stuff. And the whole court system is set up basically to allocate who gets to have what. And people endlessly fight over boundaries. If you look at the so-called United States of America, and you can see its history, there were indigenous tribes living here at a certain point. They fought over who got to have which area. I mean, I don't know who'd fight over Nebraska, but some people did. And then there's, other people landed on the shore and said, hey, we'd like to have this too. And they started, conflicts with the people who already lived here. And then the people who came to take over, they had conflicts with themselves. At some point, the French owned a lot of the territory in the Middle West. This California, where we live now, was part of Mexico. There were wars, there were revolutions. If you trace them back, you'll see that everyone's fighting over this. And as Bhumi, Earth Personified, notes in the 12th canto of the Bhagavatam, that from her perspective, it's crazy. He said, people are coming and going. He said, you're on your way out. You just stepped in. You're only here for a few minutes, and you're using all your time to fight over all these things. But if you understand Sarvaloka Maheshwaram, everything belongs to Krishna. He's controlling it. He owns it. So just consider everything that you have and everything that's in the world. If you consider it belongs to Krishna, he's the controller of it. then you'll have peace. And finally, Suridam Sarvabhutanam, Krishna is the best friend. If you remember that no one else but Krishna can be the best friend, unless somebody's a representative of Krishna, they're simply speaking on his behalf, then they can also be a best friend. But all the other people in the world who are offering you their help are not helping you when it's independent from the knowledge of Krishna, because they're simply speculating. They may be good-hearted, but because they don't know how to help you, it's almost worse. As is mentioned in the Sri Upanishad, that ignorance is bad, but worse than ignorance, if you can imagine such a thing, is so-called knowledge. And that means that somebody who says, yes, I have a PhD in such and such, let me help you, but they don't have knowledge of Suridam Sarvabhutanam and how Krishna is controlling everything, how all sacrifices meant for him. When they help you, it's actually a disservice. And although it seems like very sophisticated knowledge because this person has a degree and all these kinds of ideas, Prabhupada mentions it's like the jewel on the head of a serpent. It looks very beautiful, and therefore it's like, oh, I want that. And then you get bit by the serpent. So, in verse 7 to 11, we'll just look at this beautiful purport. Prabhupada writes something that is practical for us, because I've mentioned about Vedic sacrifice and how Hiranyakashipu wanted to stop that. And in this verse, we hear, the basic principle of Brahminical culture is to satisfy Lord Vishnu, the personification of sacrificial and ritualistic ceremonies. Lord Vishnu is the personified reservoir of all religious principles, and he is the shelter of all the demigods, the great pitas, and the people in general. When the brahmanas are killed, no one will exist to encourage the kshatriyas to perform yagyas, and thus the demigods, not being appeased by yagya, will automatically die. Purport. Since Vishnu is the central point of Brahminical culture, Hiranyakashipu's plan was to kill Vishnu. For if Vishnu were killed, naturally the Brahminical culture would also be lost. With Brahminical culture lost, yagya would no longer be performed, and for want of yagya, the regular distribution of rainfall would cease. Yagnad bhavati parjanya. Thus, there would be disturbances all over the world, and naturally the demigods would be defeated. From this verse, we get a clear indication of how human society is disturbed when the Vedic Aryan civilization is killed and the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies performed by the Brahmanas are stopped. Kalo Shudra Sambhava, because the population of the modern world consists mostly of Shudras, the Brahminical culture is now lost and is extremely difficult to reestablish in a proper way. I might add too, the Shudras aren't very good, at least in America. People don't know how to make stuff or do services very nicely, and they charge more than any. I mean, the people who cut hair or sweep floors, they charge like $150 an hour or something like that. Therefore, Lord Chaitanya has recommended the chanting of the holy name of the Lord, which will revive Brahminical culture very easily. Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, kalo nasteva 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 gatiranyata. Because of the increment in demoniac population, people have lost Brahminical culture. Nor is there a Kshatriya government. Instead, the government is a democracy in which any Shudra can be voted into taking up the governmental reins and capture the power to rule. No commentary necessary. Because of the poisonous effects of Kali Yuga, the Shastra, Bhagavatam 12:2-13 says, Dasyu pra yeshu rajasu, the government will adopt the policies of dasyus or plunderers. Thus there will be no instructions from the Brahmanas. And even if there are Brahminical instructions, there will be no Kshatriya rulers who can follow them. Aside from Satya Yuga, even formerly, in the days when demons were flourishing, Hiranyakashipu planned to destroy the Brahminical culture and the Kshatriya government and thus create chaos all over the world. Although in Satyuga this plan was very difficult to execute in Kali Yuga, which is full of Shudras and demons, the Brahminical culture is lost and can be revived only by the chanting of the Maha Mantra. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement of the Hare Krishna movement has been inaugurated to revive Brahminical culture very easily so that people may become happy and peaceful in this life and prepare for elevation in the next. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya quotes this verse from the Brahmanda Purana. Vipra jagnadi mulam tu harir ityasuram matam harir eva hi sarvasya mulam samyam mato nripa. O king, the demons think that Hari, Lord Vishnu, exists because of the Brahmins and Yajna, but factually Hari is the cause of everything, including the Brahmins and Yajna. Therefore, through the popularizing of Hari Kirtan, or the Sankirtan movement, the Brahminical culture and Kshatriya government will automatically come back and people will be extremely happy. So this is a worthwhile cause to popularize the chanting of Hare Krishna. And Brahminical culture increases on that basis. Well, I have a note here, so I'm going to follow it. I don't know what it means exactly, but it says Sigajendra 8:3:16. So maybe there's something in this. And in just a minute, we're going to take reflections. Okay, so 8:3:16. So from this point about how when you invoke the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, you popularize it, then naturally Vedic culture arises from the chanting of Hare Krishna. Everything comes from that. So here's a verse in which Gajendra, who's offering prayers to the Lord, says, "My Lord, as the fire in irony wood is covered, you and your unlimited knowledge are covered by the material modes of nature. Your mind, however, is not attentive to the activities of the modes of nature. Those who are advanced in spiritual knowledge are not subject to the regulative principles directed in the Vedic literatures. Because such advanced souls are transcendental, you personally appear in their pure minds. Therefore, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you." In the purport, Prabhupada writes, in the Bhagavad Gita it is said, Tesham evanukampartam aham ajnanajam tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnana dipena basvata. For a devotee who has taken the lotus feet of the Lord within his heart, the Lord gives spiritual enlightenment known as Jnana Dipa, by special mercy from him, from within. This Jnana Dipa is compared to the fire hidden within Arani wood. To perform fire sacrifices, great sages previously did not ignite a fire directly. The fire would be invoked from Arani wood. Similarly, all living entities are covered by the modes of material nature, and the fire of knowledge can be ignited only by the Supreme Personality of Godhead when one takes him within one's heart. Savayamana Krishna Padara Vindayo. If one takes seriously the lotus feet of Krishna, who is seated within one's heart, the Lord eradicates all ignorance. By the torch of knowledge, one immediately understands everything properly by the special mercy of the Supreme Lord and becomes self-realized. In other words, although a devotee may externally not be very well educated, because of his devotional service, the Supreme Personality of Godhead gives him enlightenment from within. If the Lord gives enlightenment from within, how can one be in ignorance? Therefore, the allegation of the Mayavadis that the devotional path is for the unintelligent or uneducated is untrue. Yasyasti bhaktir bhagavatiya kinchana sarvargunas tatra samasate sura. If one becomes an unalloyed devotee of the Supreme Lord, he automatically manifests all good qualities. Such a devotee is above the instructions of the Vedas. He is a Paramahamsa. Even without going through the Vedic literature, a devotee becomes pure and enlightened by the mercy of the Lord. Therefore, my Lord, the devotee says, I offer my respectful obeisances unto you. This also supporting just by taking to the direct process of devotional service, then naturally all good qualities come out. And this fire of knowledge, Prabhupada writes, is ignited by the Lord within the heart. So from any position, one can make one's life auspicious and can, as Prabhupada's worldview and his mission was to spread Krishna consciousness all over the world so that this fire could pervade the whole world and affect people in the way that it's supposed to, in a very positive way so they can become advanced. And now we'll take a couple of reflections. Anything that you've heard so far? Yes.
I like the initial point that you mentioned about the object of sadhana is meant to fascinate our mind.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about, when we are reading the Rukmini section, I was thinking about how Rukmini also just heard about Krishna, and then how she got fascinated just by hearing about Krishna, she got attracted.
Yeah, I noticed that also in that section. It's mentioned that she heard about Krishna kind of incidentally from others. And she developed that attraction and determination. So that's the process, if you hear regularly. Yes, what other things did you hear so far? Yes.
I like the point where you told about Bhuktaram Yagya-tapasam, that everything is meant to be done for satisfying Krishna. It seems a very simple example that you said, when we look at the mirror, when we dress ourselves, we notice that the reflection also gets decorated. So we fail to often remember that we are part and parcels of Krishna. So when we satisfy Krishna, we automatically get satisfied. We don't have to endeavor for it separately. This struck me.
Yeah, it's a very practical thing. Because it's eternally true. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita that everyone's a part and parcel. The living entities are part and parcels of me. But they're struggling very hard with the six senses and the mind. And the way to overcome that is by reconnecting oneself to one's constitutional position. We read 2 days ago that we're operating on two platforms while we're here in the material world, because we're a mixture of matter and spirit. Actually, we're spirit, but we've assumed a temporary material body and mind. So Prabhupada says we have a constitutional nature and we also have a conditioned nature. And both have to be accommodated. But one has to distinguish between the two and understand that by investment in my constitutional nature, even as I'm maintaining my conditioned existence, only by that will I become successful and happy. And one has to distinguish between the two. Yes?
I like the analogy that you gave about the Uber study.
Yeah, it's kind of, there was this big to-do about how, people, this is going to help the whole world and the economy and how many people it was helping. But as it turns out now, there's a really rapid turnover, because once drivers realize that I'm driving and driving and driving and driving, but I'm earning $3.33 an hour for all my troubles, even though it appears that they're getting cash in hand. I mean, the MIT study really is kind of a disillusionment for those who are driving, and they're thinking, oh, I'm doing pretty well on Uber. But actually, there's so much involved. In fact, there are ways in which you can look at, this has been analyzed. People go to work. In order to go to work, you have to have a car. And then you also have to have a wardrobe. That costs a lot of money to maintain the wardrobe. And then if you go into details, you can make a long list of the things that you have to keep in order to maintain just going to your job. And if you subtract all that, see, this is something people don't think about. If you subtract all that from actually what you take away at the end of the day, then you end up with $3.33, no matter where you work. And even that, then the government will take the rest of that away, and you'll end up, hey, you don't have anything. See, that's the point. You don't have anything anyway. It all belongs to Krishna. And if you just realize that your constitutional position is that I'm a servitor of Krishna, there's no anxiety, because my dealing with the material world, it doesn't work out, because I can't handle it. It's not an energy that I can accommodate very well, or at all, ultimately. Govindacharya Prabhu? Oh, yes, Yashoda Kripa.
Haribol. The shlok that we talked on, Bhoktaram Yajna Tapasam Sarva Loka Maheshwaram Suhudam Sarva Bhutanam Gyatamam Shanti Michyati. So this shlok actually portrays a very beautiful picture of God Krishna as a kind-hearted friend to everyone. Versus some popular beliefs in other religions that where over the centuries and over the time periods we have learned that things have been modified or whatever happened, but those religions are portraying a very hellish or a punishing image of God. Like if you don't do this, don't follow, He will punish you and you will rot in hell forever and ever, all those things. Versus the real picture of God who is really helpful and kind-hearted to you. And all the three properties, that you give the formula of three things to remember. Then the kind-heartedness of the God, Suhridam, is basically something that portrays that He is very soft and friend to everyone.
Yeah, it's a very important point. And you mentioned that if you don't do the right thing, then you'll be punished. But it's even worse than that. There's a pervading idea that God is arbitrary, because people are born with various advantages, relative advantages over others. What happens if you're born poor and ugly? What happened to you? It's like, okay, it's just God's test. Well, why does one person get tested like this and another person get tested like that? This is what Chaitanya Charan Prabhu describes as divine caprice. Capriciousness means whimsy. God's just playing around with everybody, and there's no fair system. There's no mercy in it. This, of course, is not a complete philosophy and not understanding, because once you go into understanding how the universe is set up in such a way that everybody gets exactly what they deserve, and that it's not a punishment, but it's actually a means of refining oneself so that one can come to perfect knowledge and harmony, and one sees that Krishna is the friend, and also the way He's set up everything is benevolent, then life takes on a new meaning. And if one has a philosophy that's incomplete, then one will also act in an incomplete way, and one will not feel happy or satisfied, ultimately. Yes, 2 or 3 more. Jai Kanai.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for the very enlightening class. I kept hearing this phrase like submissive oral reception time and again, and I was not able to connect the word submissive before today, but yeah, you explained it means with faith and conviction, and then it connects. Really.
Yes, and in various sections of the Bhagavatam, Prabhupada points out that by this one quality alone, one can come to the perfection of devotional service. That one quality is submission. If you submit to Krishna, especially through the process of submissive oral reception, then this is the way in which one rapidly makes progress. So submitting oneself. There are ways in which one may listen in an argumentative way, or be inattentive, which is a way of voting with one's feet that I really don't consider this to be very important. In fact, it's one of the ways in which, by just giving attention to the holy name, you're proving your devotion to the holy name, that I believe in this. Otherwise, the mind says, there's nothing in this for me, so I'm going to go somewhere else while you're chanting. And however, giving one's full attention to Krishna is a kind of love. It's showing that I believe in you and I actually love you. So I'm giving you my attention. Yes?
I have a question, follow-up question.
A follow-up question, okay.
So we heard in previous 2 lectures that everybody gets what they deserve. But at times we are talking to people who are in those hard places or hard circumstances, and it becomes very difficult for the person who is talking or trying to explain to them that you are getting exactly what you deserve. So I wanted to request if you can tell us how to talk through those situations with those people.
In order to that's a very blunt and startling statement that everyone gets exactly what they deserve, especially because everyone's suffering in the material world. And even for devotees, it's very difficult. Devotees dedicate themselves to Krishna and then something will happen. It's inexplicable. And it's very difficult for that to keep away that little voice that says, why me? And why now? Or when something happens to one of our beloved devotees, and they're like, Krishna, what were you thinking? I remember, when Indra Prabhu suddenly left, and then there was one of my god sisters in Vrindavan wrote a poem. It's like, Krishna, what were you thinking? So it's not so easy. So there's a context that's necessary in order to present that. And I just over the last week we went to Salesforce and Google and we were talking about karma. Fortunately, I had my Changing Bodies exhibit and I brought it with me. And when I was showing it, then I was also feeling like I need 3 of these, or 300 of them, put side by side to present the context of this. As when people hear through categories of knowledge that we're on a continuum, and this is a very key point, we're on a continuum, and that whatever happens in a previous life can also then will get the reaction in a life in the future. That's an important context to understand. Otherwise, people become incensed. And even if you give the context, even at Salesforce, when I gave the context and explained it, there was one person that says, this feels like a very disempowering thing, because how can bad things happen to good people? Which is something that I had already gone through, and then we went through it again. And then the person became accepting of the idea and appreciating. But you definitely have to have the context to understand that statement and not just make it. In fact, there's a famous case, and this might have also been an article in the BTG, or at least it was an article somewhere that floated around ISKCON, of a famous soccer coach in the UK who believed in reincarnation. And he had mentioned in some interview, he was very famous and popular, and he had mentioned in an interview about how when people were born with disabilities, it was karma they were getting from previous life. And he was summarily fired and became persona non grata because there was such a public outcry. Because it lacked the context. They couldn't understand the whole thing, and therefore people are repulsed by this idea that because they perceive it as arbitrary, and they get what you deserve, but I can't see it. It's just, why does a baby deserve something like that? Or I didn't hurt anybody. Why did this happen? It's due to incomplete knowledge and lack of context. There's a couple more, and then we'll come back to Manjula Kanta. Go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
The same, the Bhaktaram Yagatapajam Sarvalokam Maheswaram, in that context, Krishna says, I am the master of all billion of universe and I am the supreme enjoyer. But still, he is our greatest friend. Generally, we have seen that whoever is in that kind of little topmost position, they get puffed up. But Krishna says, I am your dearest friend. So that gives us much more pleasure that we are serving to a Lord, even if he is the master of billion of universe, he is so dear to us. He is so loving, and it gives a great pleasure to serve such kind of magnanimous personality. And in that context, when I was in the Rukmini Devi, she is saying that you are my husband, and I surrender to you. We have seen so many Bhagavatam story, Gajendra, Prahlad Maharaj. Whenever somebody surrenders, Lord goes out of the way to actually help them. And in that Chaitanya Chaitamrita, I was just reading, I will take 1 minute, even a Lord is not fulfilling the desire of Radharani and Gopis to go back from Dwaraka to Vrindavan when Radharani and Gopis are lamenting. He becomes debted, and he came to the Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to feel the separation So such kind of magnanimous personality if Lord is, and that gives us so much satisfaction and encourage to really be in the service of Lord. Thank you.
You make good points, and with such utsahan too. It's very nice. Thank you. Was there one or two more? Okay, two more. Manjula Kanta, then Shraddha.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, you were saying when people hear through categories of knowledge that we are on a continuum, they struggle to understand it because their understanding of life is arbitrary.
Arbitrary means that there's some kind of, either the universe is arbitrary or God's arbitrary or capricious in the way it's being meted out. So they become angry.
Arbitrary, it says, is based on random chance.
Yes.
So we assume that what we get is just because the dice rolled wrong for we.
Well, either that or there's an idea of a malicious God or a capricious God. See, either there's no control or it's all happening by chance, and that's very disempowering, because then what can I do? I either, win the lottery or I don't. And the other one is that there is a God, but he's just messing with us. It's like, let's put this guy in a disadvantage, and then this one start over here. Nobody likes that kind of thing. If you have a teacher who does that, offers you a quiz, and he's like, okay, Bobby, you could take this, and you take that one. This is twice as hard, No one's going to appreciate that. So to understand the context that there's an equitable way in which Krishna is working everything out, and that can be studied, that can be looked at, and also the understanding that I'm not a dead stone. I'm actually responsible for what I do. You can't have it both ways. You can't say that I don't want anything bad to happen to me and I also want free will, because as Gandhi said to the rulers of India at the time, the British, they said, well, we don't trust you to have independence. He said, we want to be trusted to do the wrong thing, even if you think we'll do the wrong thing. And so that's what freedom means. You have freedom of choice to even do the wrong thing if you want to. That's Krishna's arrangement, that the free will of the living entity, that's our power to do the right or wrong thing, and therefore we have to take responsibility that whatever situation I'm in now, I've created myself. Coming to that realization means that we then have the power, understanding that I'm an agent of change, to improve myself. And the proof that I am an agent is that the Shastra is there. Even though one may say, oh, everything's happening by the power of destiny, and I'm forced by so many influences to act in a certain way. Still, the Shastra is loud and clear, and it says, oh, okay, improve yourself, come out of it. And because it's saying that, it means that we have the power to do it. Otherwise, it has no meaning. There's no logic to the Shastra at all. Shraddha?
So Maharaj, I was thinking about the comment that you had made regarding everything belongs to Krishna, and you had said that everything belongs to Krishna and we actually can't handle it.
Yes. In fact, in the story of Hiranyakashipu, when Brahma's listening to all his demands, Prabhupada mentions that one should not take any benediction that one cannot enjoy peacefully. And so the request on behalf, the living entity who prays to God and says, give me some material benefit, he doesn't understand you can't enjoy it peacefully. You can't take any of it peacefully. Of course, you can take tena tyaktena bunjita. If you take what's allotted to you and you use it properly, then you can be peaceful. But if you ask for more and you think that that's going to make me happy, this is mentioned in the Chaitanya Charitamrita that Bhukti Mukti Siddhi Kami Sakaliya Shanta, that Krishna Bhakta Nishkam Ataiva Shanta Bhukti Mukti Shri Kami Shakaliya Shanto. That the only person that's actually satisfied is the person who's Nishkam. He doesn't have any desire for himself, he only wants to serve Krishna. It's the Bhakta. Everybody else, Bhukti, I want material benediction. Mukti, I want freedom from it all, which is a reaction to that. And Siddhi, I want some mystic perfection. All these people are Shanto. Yeah.
So in this context, earlier when you were reading the pastime of Rukmini, and you're asking for verses that stuck you. So
Yes.
Rasika Shiromani Mataji had actually sent a verse which I didn't get a chance to tell you, but it kind of ties with this because she said the one that she liked was where Rukmini is saying that Shishupal is like Shishupal's action is like a jackal trying to take away something that belongs to the tiger. So
Yes.
I was just thinking that our lording over the nature is just like that.
That's
you know,
right.
Trying to
Yes.
jackal behavior.
Very much so. Malini.
The point that you made that merging into Krishna is actually means to merge with the purpose of Krishna. That was really nice because the purpose of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu when he came, he was to propagate the chanting of the holy names, and that ties very nice with the purport which says when you increase the chanting of the Hare Krishna, then the Brahmanical culture comes back, and then the Kshatriyas and everything falls into place. So it was very nice.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for remembering that.
Prabhuji,
And the merging, yes, you have another point. Go ahead.
I had a question, Prabhuji.
Oh, yeah.
Prabhuji, many times we hear that we have to worship the lotus feet of Krishna, lotus feet of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and in the purport also it's mentioned that we have to carry the lotus feet of Krishna in our heart. Can you elaborate more on what does it mean practically to worship the lotus feet of Krishna?
I'll give you Prabhupada's answer, because this is how he answers consistently, and that is remembering the order of the spiritual master. Yasya prasada bhagavat prasado, yasya prasada nagati kutopi, dhyayam stuvams tasya yasastri sandhyam, vande guru shri charanara. So, on a practical level, for me to think of Krishna's lotus feet seems very distant, but Krishna extends himself to me in this world in a very localized way, in the form of the spiritual master as a representative. Like, it's hard for me to, appreciate Oracle, but if a simple person from Oracle comes over to my house and he's empowered to speak on behalf of Oracle, he can sit in the living room and I can appreciate him and we can discourse. He'll tell me about, what my part, how I can connect with Oracle, sign the contract and the whole thing, and then it's very practical. So in a similar way, the spiritual master may appear to be an ordinary person, but such a person is delegated, is a representative. And if one follows the order of the spiritual master, then in a very practical way, one keeps Krishna's lotus feet within one's heart and always feels connected to Krishna. This is the answer Prabhupada gives again and again, and how he explained his constant connection through remembering the order of his spiritual master and all of his success as well. Yeah. Yes. Another question.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, my question is from the letter of Rukmini, that she basically asked Krishna to follow the Rakshasa way of kidnapping a woman. On the other side, I've read in several other occasions and purports, Srila Prabhupada mentions this as a Kshatriya ritual to win a woman win a war or battle and then marry her as a wife. So I'm just unable to reconcile these two things. Rakshasa is more of a mode of ignorance and considered demoniac in nature, versus Kshatriya ritual of winning a wife is more like a mode of passion and kind of more respected and reputation, kind of traditional way of winning a wife. So how do we reconcile this Rakshasa thing?
What is the Kshatriya means of marriage?
As Prabhupada mentions in the purports, that the traditional Kshatriya way is to win a wife in a battle by fighting or winning by exercising your right over something, rightful right. So this is something I'm unable to reconcile between Rakshasa way of kidnapping, what Rukmini mentions, versus the Kshatriya traditional way.
Well, it's he really did both in that context because he fought off all the relatives. It's more of semantics, I think, in this case, because he did both. He carried her away, and it's the drama of the story, really. She was like, "Just get me out of here. Just come and grab me and take me away." The fact that she mentions the Rakshasa way, Krishna takes any way that becomes glorified. Even, in the story he ran away from Jarasandha, and everyone's like, oh, that's cool. It's not like he's a coward. So if he takes a Rakshasa marriage, then it's like, well, that's far out. He just grabbed her. Did you hear about it? He grabbed her off the thing, and off the chariot, and took her away. But he also fought off everybody, because they all got upset, chased after him, and then he just picked them apart, basically. So either way, yes. I have a couple more points to make after this.
I was just thinking, Prabhu, how Rukmini haven't met Krishna, but she has just heard about him. But then she is kind of giving an order, even though it's a request. But Krishna just totally trusts, and then he comes, he takes the action. But I was just thinking the verse that we sang on Gaura Purnimari, the Jeev Jago, like how Bhaktivinoda Thakur says that, I am your only friend, like who other than Gaura is there. So, but he is the one who incarnated to save us. But it is true, because we say, Rukmini asked and Krishna does it like a servant. So it was really touching that Krishna trusts and he does it like a true friend and doesn't ask any questions.
Yeah, it is very touching. Yeah. I'm glad we read that story, aren't you? Didn't it change your life, just hearing it? So in this chapter too, also what's notable is that Hiranyakashipu gets together his family, mostly his nephews and his mother, because Hiranyaka had been killed. And he then speaks to them about self-realization in order to appease them. So this is the way in which we deal with all the adversities of life. First and foremost is philosophically. When something happens, we have to rise to the philosophical level. And the best kind of philosophy is understanding Atma Tattva Gyan. So he teaches his family members, and keeping in mind that it's an interesting juxtaposition, because the fact that he's a demon, he wants to destroy Vedic culture, and then a few verses later we find how Hiranyakashipu is speaking this perfect Atma Tattva Gyan to his nephews. Do you know about this? Of course. He, just as a summary, he tells his family members that Hiranyaka, he was killed, but all of us are just passing through. And he gives the example of how people enter within an establishment to have some beverage or something. Like what is that? Daba. Hariom Daba. This is kind of like that, I don't know if Hariom Daba is still in business because they moved the freeway over, but that used to be the road to Vrindavan. On the way back, for some reason, every ISKCON car driver would stop at Hariom Daba and have a paratha or something like that. And people come there to these little roadside places, and they'll sit down, and there's a family here, a family there. They take up conversation, and it's like, oh, how are you? Fine, how are you? And then they get up and go in their cars, and they never see each other again. So in a similar way, Hiranyakashipu told his family members, we're all travelers like that, and we're just moving from one place to the next. This word traveler comes up a lot in the Bhagavatam, and even in the Chaitanya Charitamrita, when Mahaprabhu is speaking about the living entity, he calls him a traveler. Brahmanda Brahmate Kon Bhagyavan Jeev, Guru Krishna Prasadi Pai Bhakti Latapi. She said, we're wandering from one place to another, traveling. The word traveler, comes from the word travail, which means to suffer. The traveling is not, it's actually, read about it years ago, that people who are public speakers, it appears to be a very glamorous thing, traveling here, there, and everywhere. And I read an article by one of them, it was in the National Speakers Association. He was saying, after you see the restrooms in all the different airports around the world, you realize how unglamorous travel really is. And the living entity is inconvenienced in so many ways by having to travel. It's a travail. And there's a sense of being displaced constantly, moving here and there. So this is, as Hiranyakashipu is explaining to his family, it's like, this is our situation. We're just moving about and being forced to move. And then he tells a story of Suyagya, And Suyagya is a great king who dies on the battlefield, and then his queens are attached to him, don't want to put him in the fire, and Yamaraj comes as a small boy and instructs them in knowledge and tells them that you're ignorant, you never even saw your husband, and that actually he never dies, he's simply moved on. And then finally he tells the story of the Kalinga birds, and the hunter comes and he sees the family of Kalinga birds, and he throws the net, and then the little babies are caught, and when the mother and father come back, they are lamenting about, my babies are caught. So then the mother Kalinga bird tries to fly and rescue them, and she gets caught in the net also. And then the male Kalinga bird's crying, he's standing there crying, thinking what to do, and then the hunter shoots him. Little scenario of material life. And so he describes how, everyone's trying to protect, save everyone else, meanwhile they're not protected or saved. And this is his summation to his family of why we shouldn't be attached to our families. And of course, that doesn't mean you shouldn't take care of people and you shouldn't have human emotions, but it gives a philosophical perspective to see how we're simply moving through this world. And in a couple of points from the purports that you can take away with you. One is from 7:238, and at the end of the purport, Prabhupada writes, the Lord says, Sarva dharman parityaja mamekam sharanam vraja. Give up all other duties and simply surrender unto me. One who does not abide by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given the facility to enjoy this material world. Instead of restricting him, the Lord gives the conditioned soul the opportunity to enjoy, so that by mature experience, after many, many births, bahunam jamanamante, he will understand that surrender to the lotus feet of Vasudeva is the only duty of all living beings. This is an important lesson in our free will, and that Krishna is giving us the opportunity to do the wrong thing, if we so desire, so that we can come to mature experience. And one important point in this statement is that only by maturity can we actually have a strong foothold in the process of devotional service. Maturity means that we've come to a resolute decision within ourselves that devotional service is my only option, or that it's something that I've decided based on seeing everything else and going through everything else that I'm going to surrender to Krishna. And once that determination is there within one's heart, then no external obstacle can stop one from performing devotional service. And until that determination through maturity is there within the heart, then it's very difficult to move forward, because all the obstacles will seem insurmountable. And this we find in the prayers of Rukmini when she says to Krishna that the great souls like Lord Shiva perform all kinds of austerities in order to attain you, the dust of your lotus feet. She said that I'm prepared to give up one body after another in order to attract your mercy. And so this is a sign of maturity, of mature devotional service, mature determination. And two more points, 7:249. At the end of the purport, Prabhupada writes, one must therefore be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances in life he will remain steady in his vows. The verses we should note also, those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know very well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore, it is difficult to educate a person in illusion. So, Prabhupada points out again that one must be educated in self-realization so that under any circumstances he will remain steady in his vows. So this indicates that in order to remain steady in devotional service, one has to study the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. And you have to do it every day, because one of the ways in which one falls behind in any discipline or in any project is letting the trail go cold. For instance, in writing, the bane of writers is leaving gaps and letting the trail go cold. It's amazing how fast the trail goes cold in the material world because of the onslaught of material nature. If you take a break from what you're doing and don't stay consistent with it, then a lot of other things fill in that place. Just like in gardening, if you just leave a patch of dirt outside, when you come back after a while, you'll find that it's not still a patch of dirt, it's filled up with all kinds of weeds. So we also have to educate ourselves every single day about the process of self-realization. And that can be done by studying the Bhagavatam and the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada writes in the Antya-lila that all the followers of the Krishna consciousness movement have to read all the books. Otherwise, he said, they'll fall down. So this is an indication of the seriousness of the situation here in the material world, that we are up against very powerful forces of material nature, and therefore we have to be consistent in cultivating spiritual knowledge. And we notice it also when we go to teach Krishna consciousness to others, even those who seem very interested, because they're not mature yet, and because they also don't have complete knowledge, and they don't have a consistent connection with the practice. We may see them one Sunday, and then 2 Sundays later, they've decided on a different philosophy. This happens all the time. So someone gets a hold of them, or they pick up some book. I saw this recently when we were traveling overseas. A person who had taken to Krishna consciousness with determination, and then someone said, here, read this, and it was a Mayavadi book. And they read the book, and then they just gave up Krishna consciousness. The living entity is subjected to the influence of the material nature in very profound ways, so we have to be consistent in the way that we culture Krishna conscious knowledge. And yes, from 7-243. Prabhupada writes in the middle of the purport, according to the reactions of karma, the living entity appears separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually he is very intimately related with the Lord. Consequently, even though we now seem neglected by the Lord, he is actually always alert to our activities. Just wanted you to know that. He's alert to your activities. And there's a parallel to that in 8.3.17 that I want to read you. And once I read you this, it'll make the concept even more clear. And in this verse, Gajendra is praying to the Lord. And he says, since an animal such as I is surrendered unto you, who are supremely liberated, certainly you will release me from this dangerous position. Indeed, being extremely merciful, you incessantly try to deliver me. By your practical feature as Paramatma, you are situated in the hearts of all embodied beings. You are celebrated as direct transcendental knowledge, and you are unlimited. I offer my respectful obeisances unto you, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So in the purport, in the last 2 paragraphs, Prabhupada writes, only Krishna can deliver us from this material existence. Indeed, he is always trying to deliver us. Ishvara sarva bhutanam hridayasharajana tishtati. He is within our hearts and is not at all inattentive. His only aim is to deliver us from material life. It is not that he becomes attentive to us only when we offer prayers to him. Even before we offer our prayers, he incessantly tries to deliver us. He is never lazy in regard to our deliverance. Therefore, this verse says, Bhuri Karunaya Namo Yalaya. It is the causeless mercy of the Supreme Lord that he always tries to bring us back home, back to Godhead. God is liberated, and he tries to make us liberated. But although he is constantly trying, we refuse to accept his instructions. Nonetheless, he has not become angry. Therefore, he is described here as Buddhi Karunaya, unlimitedly merciful in delivering us from this miserable material condition of life and taking us back home, back to Godhead. How's that sit with you? You liked it?
Yes.
Yeah, he's always attentive. Priya Kishori.
So this part where even before you try to attempt to pray to the Lord, he already knows what you really need, which is to be delivered from the material existence. And that reminds me of one of his names, which is Vanchatita, which means he can give something more than what you can even ask for. And so that just proves to say he knows us so well from the beginning of time and what we really need, more than we know about ourselves.
Yes, this comes up in the story of Kardama Muni. When Kardama Muni meditates for 10,000 years, and then the Lord appears. In fact, he's so compassionate when he appears that tears come from his eyes out of compassion for the sage. Can you imagine such a thing? It's so beautiful. And now he comes before Kardama Muni and to fulfill his desires, and Kardama opens his eyes, begins to pray to the Lord, and then in the midst of his prayers he said, and like a wife, and the Lord replies, yes, I already know that. And I've already arranged for you, for your wife. And who did he arrange? Devahuti, the daughter of Swayambhuva Manu. And so Prabhupada points out in the purport, he said, so if you want something, it's better to put it before the Lord, because if you try to arrange it, you'll blow it. But if the Lord arranges it, then it'll be beyond what you can imagine. Devahuti comes, and she's, a princess, and the whole thing's perfectly arranged. So yes, there will be material desires, but if you leave it to Krishna, that it's up to you. I'll go on serving, but you make whatever arrangement you think is necessary. Then he can make the best arrangement. And this is one of the points about Krishna being omniscient, is that it's not that he's omniscient and therefore everything we do is futile, because he is predetermined everything that will happen. But what it means is that he's the best arranger of everything in our life, and he also knows exactly how to deliver us. So it's best if we just take his instruction, and this is the simplicity of devotional service. It simply means surrender. It means understanding this fact that he's the receiver of all sacrifices, that he can reciprocate that he owns everything already, and that he's our best friend. And if you just surrender to him, then he will make all perfect arrangements. And that becomes quite invigorating, the whole concept of how one can surrender more and more and render more service to Krishna. And then a competition ensues, because the devotee just wants to give more to Krishna, and Krishna wants to give more to the devotee. But the devotee won't take it. He only wants to surrender. And so Krishna tries to find ways to give more to the devotee. And that's one of the reasons that if you serve the devotees, then you get Krishna's favor. Because he wants to serve the devotees, but they won't accept it from Krishna. They only want to serve and not take. So if you give to the devotees and get them to take it, then Krishna becomes satisfied with you. He gives you special blessings. Okay, so last one I want to point out from 7:2-46. And that is that you have personal prowess. Did you know that? That means you have power. It's important to remember that you have power. You have freedom, and not only do you have freedom, but you also have power. You're agents of change. You can change your life and you can change the world. So in this verse, which reads as follows, the 5 material elements, the 10 senses, and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entity comes in contact with his material bodies, whether high or low, and later gives them up by his personal prowess. This strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different types of bodies. And if you look around the world, you notice this. I see all the time looking out my window at my home, I see birds flying around doing all kinds of stuff. You're like, how do you do that? It's like, I got some power. I'm a living entity. That's what I do. I'm powerful. I can go into different bodies. Living entities are amazing. And so we can remember this, as Prabhupada points out in his purport. The human form of body is valuable. One can use this body to go to the higher planetary systems, to Pitri Loka, or he can remain in this lower planetary system. But if one tries to return home back to Godhead, he can do that. This prowess is given by the Supreme Personality of Godhead as the Super Soul. So the word prowess means skill, it means expertise, and it means bravery in battle. And it comes from the French word valiant, which means courage and determination. So that's there within us. We have valiance. We have a prowess as parts and parcels of Krishna. And it's just a matter of how we direct that. If we direct that power, then it's unlimited how much service that we can do and how much positive influence we can have. And not only that, we can go wherever we want to go. If you make up your mind to go somewhere, Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Yanti Deva Vrata Devan, Pitrin Yanti Pratir Vrata, Bhutani Yanti Bhuteja, Yanti Mam Yajinopi Mam, which basically means you can go wherever you want. It's up to you. And if you decide which way you want to go, you can incrementally get there. But especially if you decide that you want to go to Krishna, then Krishna gives all help from within to direct the devotee, even if the person's normally not that smart. That happens to me all the time. I guess that's a sign, isn't it? So, we'll just take some last reflections. Yes, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So before this verse, you talked about like that Krishna will provide everything for the devotee, and the devotee will not take it. But I was just thinking about this verse, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye jana paripasate tesham nityabhiyuktanam yogakshemam bhamyam, which means that if you pray to the Lord, that Lord will preserve what you have and give what you lack. So he will. So my understanding was that he would give. First, he would give he would make you learn the Krishna consciousness. He will give you Krishna consciousness, and then he'll preserve it so you don't fall down to the material conditions of life.
Yeah, Ananyas Chintayantama means feel free to be fully absorbed in Krishna, because when somebody fully takes shelter of Krishna in his consciousness, then Krishna maintains him. Well done, sir. Yes.
With this last verse where you were mentioning prowess, I was immediately reminded of the verse from the 15th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, With determination, one must cut down this strongly rooted tree with the weapon of detachment. I feel that's like a militaristic, verse that displays that we have the prowess and the capacity to relieve ourselves from our own condition. And it gives us a sense of responsibility for our situation, so we take action to change.
I'm feeling it from you right now. Yeah, these are important concepts to remember. Yes.
Maharaj, the previous verse talks about Bhuri Karunaya.
Yes.
And this resonates with Karuna Sindhu. We say Krishna is Karuna Sindhu, Dina Bandhu, Jagatpate, Gopesha, Gopika Kanta, Karuna Sindhu. Krishna is unlimitedly merciful. And Bhagavatam repeatedly says, only a stone cannot surrender to Krishna. So, because I see this is a great point, for surrendering to Krishna, because he's so unlimitedly merciful. Why not surrender to Krishna? What is the problem?
Thank you for reminding us. That's a good point. Once I sat down for prasadam at Govardhan, Burijana Prabhu was sitting next to me. They were just serving out. So he said, can I tell you something? I said, please. And he said, 2 points. He said, Krishna's all-powerful and he's all-merciful. And then he said, if he was all-powerful but not all-merciful, then we would be in big trouble. And if he was all-merciful and all-powerful, then what could he do? But he's both. And this is, if one understands this, that he's all-powerful and all-merciful, then this is very compelling. Say, I'll give myself to Krishna. And then one might ask, how do I do that? And that's the beginning of the practice of devotional service. What are the favorable things I can do? One would then go to somebody who has some authority, who studied the Shastra, and say, please teach me the ways in which I can do this. And that starts the whole process of progress in devotional service in life. You had last ones.
So Maharaj, I was thinking in the context of we having the prowess to move in the material world and go to other planets. I do come across people who express a very strong desire to go to the heavenly planets. Like, I just want to see that kind of stuff. And then I was thinking about your definition and the emphasis about travel, Brahmane Brahmite, that it means travail. And I looked up travail in the dictionary and to find the origin, and it's got a very interesting origin. May I share that with you? So it comes from the Middle English via Old French, from medieval Latin, which means tripalium, and which means instrument of torture.
Instrument of torture.
And from the Latin, tres means three, and palace means stake. So I'm just thinking about, the three, the same thing. The Adhibhatik, Adhidevik, Adhyatmik, and we get all three of them when we are traveling.
Yeah. And there's a famous verse in the second canto of the Bhagavatam, which Shukadeva Goswami says that devotional service is like coming home. For someone who's been traveling and traveling, experiences travail, the instruments of torture, and finally comes home, then feels satisfied. I just conceived this mantra that when you travel, you get what you get. When you're home, you get what you want. And you had the last point?
Maharaj, that very nicely you clarify that how sometimes we see that people take Krishna consciousness, or like 1 week they are very enthusiastic, but then second week we don't see. So you told that they have not sufficiently knowledge and taken to the regular practice. And also you told that even for us not letting the trail go cold is a very wonderful instructions. Even in our Silicon Valley, like many of our here developers, they can appreciate that. One of my senior managers was telling that you should always write 2 lines of code every day, whether anything or not there, you should check in 2 lines of code so that you make the momentum. So
that's right. So true. It's remarkably hard to come back to a cold trail. and figure out where you were. This happened to me so many times when I was writing my book because I was doing so many other things. And then, I'd come back and like, why did I write that? Where'd that come from? It would take me half an hour just to figure out why I wrote that and go back and then finally, get in the zone where you can write something. That's when Keshav Bharati Maharaj, after a while, he just said, Vaish, you got to stop doing everything else and be fully concentrated in this to do it. And similarly, Krishna recommends this for our lives also. Come to the point where you're fully concentrated on your devotional service, and if you let it go cold, it stands to reason it's very natural that you'll be go in a different direction and something else will fill those spaces, and then you'll have to struggle to get back to where you were. It's easier to stay in shape than it is to get in shape. So it's better to stay on a high platform and continue on that platform every day, and then just ride out the whole thing until you have to leave your body. Just do that. Om Tat Sat. Gaur Premanande Haribo. So
Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, hey, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman, Natari Marman.